here with Matt King. Matt King is the worship pastor of East Point Church in Lewisburg, Mississippi, eastpointdesoto.org. And so I don't know if you knew this, but we're in a pandemic. And we've never, you may have heard, or maybe you read something or saw a tweet about it. And so we've never, at least our generation, and I mean anybody on the planet, and especially in the States, we haven't had to pastor through a pandemic. And how do you continue to lead people in worship through music, or just in worship in general in a pandemic? And so we want to kind of discuss that, hear what you guys have done at your church. Your church has been growing even throughout this time. And so we want to just hear from different worship pastors. And so, Matt, I'm glad you're with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the pandemic side of things.
Yeah. Like you said, I'm a worship pastor at East Point Church in Lewisburg, Mississippi. We are we'll celebrate 9 years together as a church in January. So we started as a church plant, meeting in a school. And I technically, in the eyes of the Southern Baptist Convention that we're from, we're not a church plant anymore. We're established church after year 4, I think. But I'm the worship pastor there. I've been there since the beginning of it. I also travel and lead worship for various churches, college ministries, ministry organizations, youth camps, all that fun stuff. Yeah.
All right. So you've been doing this for a hot minute. And so the pandemic hits, everything kind of goes wacky. What was your initial response as a worship pastor when you find out we have to go virtual? We can't meet in person. We have to go virtual. What was your initial reaction in those moments?
Honestly, man, I had been going and doing and traveling on top of church responsibilities, and I was tired. And so I'm not a very smart person, and so when it originally started and we made the decision, hey, the decision was, hey, we're not going to meet this Sunday. And so I was like, oh, I get like a Sunday off. This is awesome. And then I'll remember, I don't know that I'll ever forget this, that Sunday that we kind of threw together like a quick online deal. And to close out, our pastor, he looked at the camera and he said, I do not know when we'll meet again. And that's when I was like, oh man, this is more serious than, we're going to have a couple of weeks off or 2 or 3, a month off even. And so that then initially was a little bit more worry and just fear. I'm a worrier. And so worried of how I'm supposed to lead for people who are, across the county in their living rooms in their pajamas. So,
well, I think that's one of the things, and I think to worship pastors and churches even now is we've never done this before. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't know what to expect, obviously, on the front end. And in some ways, we still don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And I think we got to give ourselves some grace and not feel this enormous pressure to know what to do, because we don't know what to do. We're writing the book as far as pandemics are concerned. So definitely I don't know what to do. It's okay. It's okay not to know what to do. Well, when your congregation hears that, your pastor looks in the camera and says, we don't know when we'll be back together. Yeah. How did the congregation handle that initially?
Well, when we first started, they did really well. We had more views on our live stream than we had attendance in a normal Sunday morning, And so for the first few weeks, they were there, they were with us, more viewers than ever as far as just seeing our service is concerned. And then it slowly began to fall. And our people were really patient with us as we kind of learned what our online services need to look like. They were very supportive and encouraging, and they were grateful for what we were doing for them. But it literally, you could watch the needle just kind of drop every week. As far, I think week 1 we had, and we're a smaller church. And so at the time we were only averaging about 150, 160 on a Sunday. and we'd have like 200, 225 the first week. And then the next week it was like 200. And then the next week it was like 175. It would just drop almost by the 20s, and until like by the time that we resumed in person, I mean, it was like 40 views a week, for a service. And like part of you is frustrated, but at the same time, you're like, man, like, I mean, I think I get it. Like it's worn off on people. Everything else by that point had gone virtual, work, and they're in front of screens all day long. And Sunday had just become another time where they're supposed to sit in front of another screen and kind of do the same deal. And so it just kind of dropped consistently. People missed us. They were very vocal about missing being together and missing meeting, but the viewership just continued to drop, honestly, until we started meeting in person again.
So your church decides to do just all online services. What was kind of the setup for your service when you were virtual?
Well, it's probably a good thing to mention that our sound guy at our church is a professional sound engineer. He works for St. Jude. He's an events coordinator. I mean, he is one of the smartest individuals I've ever met. And so when we kind of threw together week one, he just used a couple of iPhones and a little audio device to be able to pull the audio into the phone, and just a stage light or two, and it was super simple. But as it went on, we did that live for a couple weeks, and there was a Sunday where I did not realize that we had no way to give me monitor at the time, because now also it's important to know that we were going to a school, because we were still meeting in a school at the time. So we were going to a school, setting up our streaming stuff every week, and then doing live streaming services. And so, we had a time crunch to set up as well. And so, but there was one Sunday where my pedal board was on. I had my delay on, but I didn't have monitors, so I didn't hear it. And he literally had to army crawl on the floor so that he didn't get in the frame, and turn my delay pedal off, and then army crawl back out of the frame, and then go into the audio feed. And so it was at that moment where we were like, pre-recorded is probably a better option for us.
So at that point, you were doing live.
At that point, we were doing live at the school, which had spotty internet. And so if anything went wrong, we were in trouble. And we were also having to get up there beforehand and make sure we were giving us enough time to set up and troubleshoot everything so that we could start at 10. And so it was risky business there but that only lasted, we were in the process of building as the pandemic hit. And so that only lasted, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And then we were out of the school and we were able to get into our building. But when we got into the building, we were like, we've got to pre-record. It's the only way.
So you get into a building, which probably most people that watch this, can identify maybe with that. And, was it because you could just set everything up at once and leave it and kind of get things, I guess, in place one time rather than week after week?
Yeah, I think so. It gave us there's no pressure as far as troubleshooting, and we could kind of structure the service that our people saw to be a little bit more ideal for sit at home and watch with your kids, where there's no childcare deal. And so we cut our services pretty drastically as far as time and structure. We restructured it a lot so that, and we even included like some participant elements, as far as like we still did our responsive reading. And so we were giving them time to read a passage of scripture together before we dove into the sermon. And so structuring it in that way so that we would, if this makes any sense, we could kind of put the pieces where they needed to be and shoot them in a certain way that it was more effective.
And so you shortened your service.
Yeah.
What things did you cut out?
So we typically do, on a live Sunday, we would do an opening song, a welcome, a collective or individual prayer, 2 songs, responsive reading, prayer, sermon, response. And so we trimmed it to a welcome, responsive reading, 2 songs, and then our pastor cut his sermon by probably 15 minutes. So he would do like a 30-minute sermon, or a 25-minute sermon, and that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long, I guess, were you guys, did it take you long to figure out, hey, we do really need to shorten this? Or is that almost immediate?
Well, with our time constraint, it was almost immediate initially, and then as a couple of weeks went on, we kind of understood, okay, hey, this didn't work so well. We've got to shorten this, or hey, again, like our parents are at home. We had a lot of young couples with young kids, and so realizing that that's the bulk of our congregation, and so like they're not going to sit in their living room and listen to our pastor preach for 40 minutes. So hey, I've got to shorten this to 25 minutes and give them something that they can actually hold on to, as opposed to just trying not to drown, in the chaos of kids and being home and all this other stuff. So
I got you. Well, as far as leading worship virtually, there's nobody, and recording it,
yeah.
so there's literally no live interaction whatsoever. What did you find to be the most challenging aspect of leading virtually?
As a worship leader, my biggest thing, this was ingrained into me a few years ago by the folks at 10,000 Fathers, and it was worship leaders don't just lead songs, they lead people. And so when you take people out of the equation, it's really hard to lead them, and so I'd always identified myself as anybody can lead songs. It's a whole nother thing to lead people. And so that's always been my goal, is how can I read the room? How can I know, hey, do we need to sit in this song a little bit longer? Hey, do I need to give some context on the song to help people connect to it more? Or they're not connecting with this at all. We need to get out of here and go a different direction. All of that was eliminated. And for a while, it just felt like a guessing game of what we need to sing, what our people need to hear, things like that. And so it was just challenging from just an interaction standpoint. Because even if you call people and talk to people, like they can tell you one thing, but their facial expressions might tell you something else. You may get something else from them, that you're having a conversation and you're reading them as they're interacting with you. And you can say like, hey, they may be telling me one thing, but I feel like they're holding back, or there's something deeper, or they're saying they're okay, but they're really worn down. And when you take all that away and you stick a camera in front of you and you say, all right, lead worship, man, for me, it was really challenging. I really struggled. I really did.
Did you get feedback from people to try to figure out, like, is it connecting? Is it working? Do I need to adjust something during that time?
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot of positive feedback, honestly. Members text you, or they comment on social media about how grateful they are that you're doing it. And our staff and their spouses were so gracious to me as far as just encouraging me. But I am very much my biggest critic. And I was just very critical of myself during this time. Satan really just used this time to just cast doubt in my mind. I just felt like I was not equipped, and no one was really, but I just felt really unequipped and really inadequate, and struggled with feeling like I was making a difference during a season where I really felt like I needed to make a difference. And so it was challenging, man.
I think that's interesting. You say none of us are equipped to quote unquote do this during a pandemic. Like there's no training. There's no class on this. There's no chapter in the book that's like, if a pandemic comes, this is how you do it. And so do you think it forced you to just really rely on, I guess, really just the fundamentals of worship?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been very meticulous about how I plan a set list, or how I structure a worship service if I'm the one picking the songs and the layout, which I, for the most part, have pretty much all freedom to do at our church. But I, even more so, you would think that when you cut your set list from 2 to 4, it would take you less time to plan it. And for me, it was the complete opposite. I mean, I spent more time trying to figure out what 2 songs can I do that can completely communicate the character of who God is and what our response should be to his character. And so for me, it was challenging to just do 2 songs that I felt like were enough, if that makes enough sense, to carry a service.
All right. So your church is back in person now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Now, are you still doing a live feed?
We're not. The new building, I mean, when we resumed, that was our first Sunday service in our new building. And so the area that we are in is a growing area. It's developing, but Wi-Fi wise, it's still slow. We don't have the internet capability to stream, honestly. So we're recording and we're posting the sermons online.
Okay, so you're still posting online after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you've gathered back together. We're still in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that part, we've got in some ways, our arms and minds wrapped around what this is, but it still exists, and there's still challenges that come along with leading and gathering during a pandemic. So since you've begun gathering in person again, what are some new challenges that you have in that realm?
Well, probably the same challenges that everybody else is facing. Certain expectations on what resuming services should look like, whether or not you should be wearing masks, stuff like that. But we're still down to 3 songs. We still haven't bumped that back and forth because we went to 2 services to social distance, and so our pastor still cut a little bit of his sermon off, not as much. He's probably narrowed it down about 35 minutes or so. And so I still struggle with, again, like picking songs that can flow together in just a couple of moments, essentially. Because for me, response time, I'm trying to play off what our pastor's doing. So you still only get 2 songs before the sermon. And so trying to put something together that flows well, that communicates well, that's volunteer friendly for our musicians, stuff like that. And so, yeah.
So you've gone to 2 services, though. So that's added something new that you weren't doing beforehand. Mm-hmm. Is that more exhausting for you? Is it I guess what's the challenges of one, you haven't seen your people much since March, and now what was one group is 2 groups. You are having a smaller set than normal, and you have to do it twice. Mm-hmm. Is that more taxing on you?
Yeah, what's one thing it's not mentioned is that our small groups meet every other week. And so every other week, we're not only doing 2 services, I'm getting to the building at 6:45, I'm leaving at 12:30, and then we're back up there at like 5 to do small groups for a couple of hours in different homes. And so our first Sunday we did that, I felt like somebody who just decided to go out and run a 10K with no training. I was exhausted. But yeah, it wears on you. You feel my daughter goes down for a nap at around 1:30 on Sunday, and I go down too. Man, I'm out, and so I get a nap in the bed every Sunday. It's exhausting, and we experienced. We've had a lot of visitors come, whether it's people looking for a new church home or their church hasn't been meeting, and so they're coming to our church because our doors are open. And so when you go from 1 service to 2, and you don't have time to cast vision and prepare for it, and then you have this influx of visitors coming in. One of the things that we have heard from our members is like, we feel like very almost feel like they've come back to a new church. Some of them have used the term disconnected, and it's not anything that the church is doing specifically. It's just the fact that it's 2 services. You're seeing half the amount of people that you normally see, and the other half that you do see are people that you've never seen before because they're visitors. And so combine all that with doing 2 services, and you're trying to get around and speak to people that you haven't seen in months, on top of trying to wrangle your worship team in and make sure that you're starting on time because you got another service to follow. And then many of we've got so many other areas for volunteers to fill in at, and making sure you're not like putting them in a bad position by pulling worship team members out of that. And so it's like a balancing act. It really is just trying to make sure you're not overusing volunteers because you've essentially given them twice as much work to do.
Are y'all taking some steps? What are conversations you've had, I guess, as a staff? Obviously, you're not, blind to the challenges, and you're not blind to, okay, we've got this influx of visitors. Yeah, and our core group of members is now in 2 different spots. As a staff, have y'all had conversations on how do we attack this challenge?
The challenge of
you said that you have members feeling disconnected,
mm-hmm.
and the struggle for them.
Mm-hmm.
What are conversations you as a staff are having to combat that?
Our small groups are really central to what we do, and so just emphasizing the importance of that to our small group leaders and their responsibility of reaching out to other people, reaching out to their small group members, and making sure they're engaging in them, having conversations with our deacons, making sure they're contacting the families that they're in charge of, just trying to do that from the top down as far as making sure our people are checking in on their people. We're still, as far as visitors and all that stuff, we're still seeing an influx. And so even if COVID wasn't an issue, we would still be in a situation to where we'd probably be at 2 services now, even if we weren't in a pandemic. And everything that we've read on 2 services is prepare for a momentum shift and prepare your people for what to expect. Well, we didn't get to do that. Pandemic just pulled the rug out from under us, and we just got thrown into that with no heads up, essentially. And so we're kind of learning on the fly what we can do to get people to feel like they are connected. And so resuming small groups has helped, but just trying to be as intentional as possible of having conversations. We've established, this sounds really simple, but we kind of reestablished a greeting team, like a welcoming greeting team, and we pull in 4 or 5 volunteers, and their sole job is just to walk around and encourage people to talk to members, and especially those who may be like sitting in the sanctuary by themselves and I'm not talking to anyone, making sure they're being checked in on. And we're structuring some things for 2021 as well. Part of my responsibilities will shift to congregational care and making sure that the people who might be slipping through the cracks because of visitors and all that stuff, that they're being taken care of as well and being ministered to and stuff like that.
You think that's pushed you guys again? I almost wonder back to even just leading worship, of going back to the fundamentals, making sure there's even with COVID, it doesn't mean that we can't be greeting people and guiding people as a staff, communicating together. It sounds like to me, it's really just forcing churches as a whole, if we're gonna do well in this. And I think that's one of the things is churches, we can't lay down and just say, well, COVID, we can't, God is bigger than a pandemic, and the kingdom of God doesn't stop advancing because of a pandemic. And so we can't give it the excuse of like, oh, well, the kingdom of God stops advancing. The more I hear you talk and the more conversations I have with other people and even my own experiences here, it sounds like it's really just pushing us back in many ways to how strong is your foundation? How good are you at the fundamentals? I often think of like in baseball, you see these baseball players is when they're at bat, they all have these different stances. But once the ball is in the process of being delivered, they all go to basically the same fundamental aspects of a swing. The stance is just the lead into the fundamentals. And if you don't have the fundamentals, it doesn't matter what your stance is. And so the more I hear you talk, it sounds like the fundamentals: communication, small groups, people gathering together, building those relationships continually, and just even leading worship. We can no longer depend on, the experience side of things. It's really pushed us out in the open of, okay, the experience is taken away, any gimmicks we have are taken away, and just being able to trust that people can just show up and you can give them a good show, and that work is really out the window. And it comes down to, how good are you at the fundamentals of relationships, of small groups, of leading genuine worship, of trusting the word in your teaching. And we have to just rely on those fundamentals. And to me, the more I hear you talk, that's what I continue to hear. We're just making sure we've got the fundamentals, shored up, because we can't really do anything more than that. And I think many of us have to just trust the fundamentals are enough. The Bible is enough, right?
Yeah.
Genuine worship that focuses on the one true God, it is enough. Genuine, just small groups and relationships, that is how we will grow. And it feels like as forces that way. Well, who knows when all this will settle, but what do you think when COVID and it all settles, the dust settles for this whole thing, how do you think the church will be different? Or do you think the church will be different?
Man, I feel like my opinion on that changes every week. I think back to the first time that our small group resumed, and one of our members was like, "Man, like, when this is all said and done, like, we're going to see like who's really devoted to the church and who's really serious about their faith," because, he, referenced like, limitations on gatherings and, the danger of mass gatherings and all that stuff. He's like, you're going to see like who's really intentional and, being plugged into the body and serving the church. And I was like, oh man, like the Lord's really like doing things. And then like, a few weeks later, like people are missing church to go to the ball field, and you just want to like throw something at somebody. But I think my hope is, at least, is that as it did for me, it will at least shape the pastors and the leaders of churches to be to take advantage of the moments that they have to minister to their people. And so, like, if nothing else, I feel like the pandemic has taught us is that like every moment that you have to be able to serve and to be able to pour into your people is a gift, and it can be useful. Because like I said earlier, when the people were taken away and a tripod and a camera was stuck in front of me, I felt like useless. And in that moment, I would have given anything to sit down and have a cup of coffee with like our small group leaders and just see how they're doing. In that moment, I would have done anything to, forget the lights, forget the stage. I would have loved to just sit in a room and just like sing songs together about the Lord. And so just being grateful and realizing the importance of the opportunities that you do have and not wasting those. Whether that's the songs that you sing or the small group time that you have, being more intentional with your conversation or studying the word, or whether you're a pastor, like, less stories, more scripture, whatever it may be. Just really taking advantage of the moments that you do have, because, as like numbers for this thing continue to spike, and I'm in Mississippi, and we came back under a mask mandate a couple of days ago. And so our county is under, have to wear masks again at church on Sunday. And so just taking, advantage of those moments of, the smallest thing, remember when everyone's wearing masks and you can't tell if people are smiling? Remember like how much you took for granted, the fact that you can't tell if the person, am I smiling or not? And so even like just cherishing those moments,
I can't tell you how hard I worked on my mask smile.
Oh my gosh,
with my
man.
eyes. I would be walking through a store and I just look perpetually surprised at everything. Yeah. I'm trying to I'm smiling under here.
Yeah.
And, well, that's really great. Go ahead.
I'm an introvert. And so like, that's all I have with strangers. I'm not going to be like, hey man, how are you? Like in the grocery store, like I'll give them a nod and a smile. And so I find myself even still, like I'll just look at someone and smile, and then I'll walk past them, but like they can't see my face. They just think I'm staring at them.
They're probably smiling back. Nobody knows.
Maybe so.
Nobody knows. I do think, man, that's really good advice, I think, to treasure the moments, because I know I took for granted it was gathered. Yeah. We just gather together. We do church and we gathered together and while I gathered, you don't process what it's like for that to be taken away. And so I do genuinely believe that this is an enormous opportunity for us to reframe some things, to trim some fat, to realize some things that we don't need. What are the things that we're giving enormous resources, whether that be money or time or manpower, that really nobody missed when the whole thing shut down. And if we'll ask those questions, then I think we really can come out on the other side of this better. And I think that advice of treasure the moments we have. We don't know how many we do have. And anytime that we do get to gather together and as worship leaders lead people in worship, it's way bigger than let's just play some songs for the sake of. And so I do hope that worship leaders think more about the songs you choose. Yeah. Because you don't know when you're not going to have those songs to choose again, Yeah.
And I would say too, when Easter rolled around and I'm trying to wrap my head around leading worship for an Easter service that's online and it's virtual, I remember going through this deal of, oh my gosh, like what do I do? Like, how do I make it significant? How do I make it different? I got to make it creative. And I'm talking with our pastor, and one of the things he told me, he said, people understand the times that we're in. Like if anything, they understand the fact that we can't gather and that we can't see each other. And so he said, they're not expecting this big, creative, different, influential service. He said, we've got to give them substance. And so that was huge for me, and understanding like every week doesn't have to be different. Every week doesn't have to be creative in an attempt to make up for the fact that we can't be together, or every week doesn't have to be creative in an attempt to cover the fact that we've chopped our set list in half. Instead, like take those moments, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 20 or whatever, however many minutes you have as a worship leader to lead songs, sing stuff that matters and sing stuff that will last. We have a couple at our church that their son deals with all kinds of issues with seizures and all these other things. And there was a moment where his life expectancy was like 2 years. And I gave them shortly after they moved. They were a part of our church and they moved away to help plant a church, and they came back after his diagnosis because all the doctors were here. So they come back and they led worship just a few weeks after coming back to East Point. And I just kind of like gave them the service. I said, man, you say what you want, you do what you want. And he didn't take extra time. He didn't try to be extra creative, but he just had this moment of, they sang, The Goodness of God by Bethel. And so there's just this moment where everything he's going through. I mean, they've been told, hey, your son's life expectancy is 2 years. And they had 2 songs. And in one of their 2 songs, they stood before a congregation who knew what they were going through. And they sang, all my life you have been faithful. All my life you've been so, so good. With every breath that I'm able, I'll sing of the goodness of God. And so like their context allowed them to sing something that was full of substance. And they didn't do anything special. They didn't do anything creative. It just resonated because of the situation that they were in. And he took advantage of the opportunity that he had to be able to pour forth the truth to our people. And it was one of the most important moments for us as a church as far as worship is concerned. And again, like he just took advantage of his moment, and he's saying truth, and he's saying something of substance.
Yeah, and whether we're in a pandemic, whether we're virtual, whether in person, we can always sing truth, and we can always be genuine, and we can lead people in truth, and we can lead people into genuine moments. Yeah. And I think that's great advice. Of just, I think one of the challenges we have to ask ourselves is, should the way we lead worship, should leading in genuine worship be any different, whether we're in person or whether we're virtual, whether we're in a pandemic or whether we're not? And I think those are big questions we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what about, quickly, as we get kind of ready to wrap up here, your worship team? You know, what were some challenges as far as your worship team going into the pandemic, and then now that you're back in person, are there challenges there as well, or are things kind of settled in?
We're pretty much settled in. You know, like I said, we're a small church. We've only got a couple of musicians and a couple of vocalists. But for us, obviously one of the things I mentioned earlier, when we switched to 2 services, that means the worship team is doing, you know, they're there from 8 to 12:30 rather than, I think they normally, when we were at the school, they got there at 9 and we were done by 11:30. So, I mean, they go from 2.5 hours to 4.5 hours almost. And so they're serving a lot more. And our worship team they're just so busy. Like one of our vocalists is our pastor's wife. They have 5 kids. Our lead guitarist, they have 3 kids. They're getting ready to foster more. The story I just told about the other couple, they've got 2 kids, and they're dealing with all this health issues. So they're busy. All of them are busy. They've got so much going on, but they're still, we switched to a Thursday night practice so that we had more time on Sundays to troubleshoot and all that stuff. And so they're serving twice as much on Sundays, and they're serving, a couple hours more on Thursdays. And they've thrived. I mean, they truly have. They have grown as leaders. They have grown as musicians, and the process I've seen in them spiritually and just tangibly has been incredible to me. And so, man, one of the things you mentioned earlier today, that we're designed for service, and we're designed for community. And when we plug into that and when we engage in that, we can thrive spiritually and emotionally. And so we haven't experienced a ton because, again, we shifted from a meeting in a school to a building. So we've seen a lot of change, but we haven't seen very many struggles because everything for us has just been new. So
I got you. Why do you think they've risen to the occasion? Do you think it is, we're designed for service. And so when we fit into the niche of service, then that we're designed for, then I think we do thrive. I think that's, I guess, probably one aspect of it, answering my question to you for you. But it's because I'm sure some are struggling, now with their volunteers and things like that. Do you think it's just a balance of, were your expectations of them very clear? Did you make it very clear this is how we're going to do it?
Just from a worship team standpoint, or when we returned?
From worship team standpoint.
Well, when they join, I just have like a document I sent to them. It's called, I think it's just qualifications and expectations. And it's essentially like, hey, this is what is expected of you. And it's nothing ridiculous, but I want people to understand that when they join, they're not just joining a team, like they're committing to something. And one of the things that, when we planted East Point, I was 25, and I was so nervous about having the word pastor attached to my title at 25 years old. And one of the things that somebody told me was, regardless of your age, you lead in a way that people want to follow. And so understanding that, again, I have the word pastor in my title. I'm a worship pastor, and pastors pastor people. Worship leaders lead songs. Worship pastors pastor people. And so loving on them and encouraging them. And I think so much of it is that it's not that anything that I've done, but like they feel connected to the body. Like I buy them dinner, or before practice, sometimes I'll bring them breakfast, or get them gift card, like $5 Starbucks gift cards, for Christmas. When they feel a part of a faith family and they feel connected. And they're also serving in other areas of the church, which is the qualification for them. If they want to join the worship team, they've got to be plugged in a small group, and they've got to be serving in another area. So they're already connected. And when they're connected and they're living life with people, they understand the importance of, hey, now I'm going to step on stage and I'm going to lead these people in worship. It hits home with them more. And so they understand when they're giving up 4 hours of their Sunday, and then they're coming back a few hours later to give up 2 more for small group. And when they're giving up 2 hours on Thursday, they understand, I'm not just doing this to play music. I'm not just doing this to lead worship. I'm doing this to help minister to people. And I think, honestly, that's what's driven them, from the visitors that walk into the door to seeing the members walk back through the door after 6 months of not meeting. But they're feeling the weight of responsibility that they have to minister to people and cherishing those opportunities. I think that's enabled them to be where they are.
It's a good word, I think. Yeah. So worship pastors, pastor your people, genuine worship, genuine moments, the fundamentals, cherish the moments. I think there's a lot there. Well, you got any other pieces of advice you want to give worship leaders that are leading virtually for the first time?
A question that was once asked to me that wrecked me: if you lost your ability to play guitar or play your instrument, and you lost your ability to sing today, could you still be a pastor and a leader tomorrow? Lead off stage, love your people. Worship is a lifestyle. And so if you're a worship pastor, you're leading by a lifestyle, not just in music. And I would say, just practically, lead for your context, the context that you're in. I don't know if you've ever seen this. I certainly have. Whoever watches this, they probably have seen it. I don't know if you've ever seen like a worship leader who's used to leading for like maybe 500 people or 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and you put them in a room of like 50, and they lead for a group of 50 like they're leading for a group of 2,000. Have you ever seen that? It's so awkward, right? So they're like, they may be like very eccentric and over the top, and you're like, dude, there's 40 people in here, like, you don't have to yell at me, I'm 10 feet from you. And if you lead in front of a camera, like you do for several hundred people, it might feel awkward. And so one of the things that was big for me when leading for online was understanding that the people that I'm leading for are likely on their couch, still in the thing that they slept in, and their kids are running around on the floor and they're throwing toys at each other, or they're eating snacks and they're getting goldfish everywhere. That's what my daughter was doing. And so like, lead for that context. That's the environment that you're leading for. And so understand that. And so just know your context, know your people, and that's going to enable you to lead more effectively.
All right. Matt King, he's the worship pastor, East Point Church in Lewisburg, Mississippi, eastpointdesoto.org. Matt, if somebody's watching this and wanted to reach out to you and just connect and maybe bounce around ideas and questions off of you, how could they get in touch with you? Get an email address.
Yeah, I would love to connect with anybody that has questions. I have a real desire to just help worship pastors and to encourage them. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. Probably the easiest way, most convenient way is probably Instagram. So my Instagram is at Matt King Band. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook music page. It's Matt King Webs, WEBS. Or you can email me at mattkingmusic@hotmail.com.
And they can find you on iTunes and Spotify and all those different things the same. And you can reach out to me, Austin, at visible.edu, and I can get you in touch with Matt as well. Or if we here at Visible Music College can help in any way. Well, Matt, thanks so much, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got it, man.